the first thing that I realized going into homicide was that it's clear that I'm employed by the Houston Police Department, but that I work for God. So there's no one that's going to give a voice to these victims and their families except for people that do what I do or did. And that was always the frame of mind which I had when I walked into the interview room, and I try to develop that skill. There's a lot of guys that'll tell you, because they can shoot the bull with you, that they're going to be great interviewers, and that's just not necessarily the case.
Yep. So
you have to develop. I teach in my classes, talk about it's not rapport building, because rapport building is shallow and it's temporary. So what you want to do is you want to build a relationship and understand that everything that you do through life is a relationship. Now, they may be shallow, short term, they might be long and very deep, but nonetheless, no matter who you meet and come in contact with, it's always a relationship. When you come out of the chute, doctor slaps you on the butt and says, "Welcome to the world." That's a relationship. So I just tried to carry that philosophy on through my career, and developed an empathy for people. And that's most important in the interview room when you're talking to a suspect. I mean, you're talking to somebody who has taken another human life by an act of violence, and it's my job to get to the truth. It's not my job to develop the charges. That's decided by other people. And that's what I would tell them. So my first priority is to gain their trust. And I have to do that by being empathetic to where they are and having an understanding about the three things we have in common.
Yeah, just not to deviate from what you were saying, but I just recently was on a news show, and they were talking about false confessions.
Right.
And, some in the media, when one of these stories comes out, they're hammering the police about it, and they highlight stories like this as a regular occurrence. This happens, and we're just like, listen, the number of cases, whether it's homicides or people that confess to a shooting, a robbery, a burglary, an auto theft, or whatever it may be, the false confessions, when you look at the totality of numbers, is a tiny deal. And you hit it right on the head right there. It's not an investigator's job, whether they are investigating any of those type of crimes, obviously homicide being at the top of the food chain. It's not to get a confession because that person across the table is sitting there. It's to get the truth.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that people understand that when a detective like yourself or somebody sitting in there, you're not there just to get this person right here to confess. You're there to get them to tell the truth, or a witness, or anybody else that's coming that you're interviewing.
Regardless of who the interviewer is. Yeah, Howard.
One of the things that you really brought up was empathy.
Right.
And in my profession, it's paramount. If you don't have empathy for being a nurse taking care of people, you can't do it. And I tell people constantly, my job has nothing to do with medicine. It has everything to do with people.
Right.
When you talk about empathy, and this is kind of hard for a lay person to understand, when you're an empathetic person, you can understand people's perspectives even though you don't agree with them. For example, a murderer, a criminal, someone like that, you can see them as a person, which is tough to do, especially if you know the crime they've committed. But did you find that helped you gain, being an empathetic person, helped you gain that rapport with them almost instantaneously?
It helps establish the relationship, and through the course of the interview, you have to be available,
non-judgmental,
to share a little bit of yourself. So we talk about in our training, when I talk about training in the interview process, is the life lessons, stories that you have that you can share with them. Doesn't mean you're going to be swap and spit with them at the end of the story, right? But you share a little bit of yourself, and that lets them know that you're not being judgmental, like you said, Howard, and you are being empathetic to the situation they find themselves in. And there are some people, look, I worked on over 400 homicides in the city of Houston in 23 years. That doesn't include murder for hires, aggravated assaults, kidnappings, and the other stuff that comes with working homicide.
Right.
But of those 400 homicides, they had a 96% clearance rate.
Jesus.
which is
Heck
and-
oh, yes, sir.
Yeah.
And 90% of those, I gained confessions, just to use the word. I gained confessions in those cases. Now, some of those may have been self-serving statements, but that's okay. I'll take it. But it just goes to show that because body language is body language, verbal behavioral stuff, physical stuff, it's all the same, but the approach of how you look at that person sitting across from you is what's going to, at the end of the day, is going to be the payoff.
Okay, so you said something very, very intelligent earlier about the fact that you said you want.
I've got to write that down, Howard.
Very
what was
intelligent.
that?
You
Very
said
intelligent.
You want to learn something new every day.
Correct.
So we're going to talk about, you had a 96% clearance rate. God, that's amazing, right? That's so good. Let's talk about them 4% though. Now, why didn't you clear those? What'd you miss there? Because I'm sure that you've thought about those cases. What did you not learn from those?
The good news is that there were some of those cases, because of the work I did, that were cleared later by the detectives in cold case that picked those cases up. So that's the good news. Now, not all of them, of course. And the best answer I can tell you is that I did everything possible that I could do to solve that case, but there are just some cases you hit the wall,
sure,
and that's it.
And I guess the thing I'm asking you, which is the one that kind of haunts you that, man, I wish I could have done something different in this interview and got this out of. I run into people in my line of work. Sean runs into people in his line of work. They're not like us. They're not human. They don't.
Oh, no.
You don't have the ability to empathize with them because you can't possibly think like they do.
No.
And it's not so much even thinking of it. It's just basically walking behind them and looking through their eyes. Those are the people that really worry me. Those are the people that I can't understand, and those are the tough ones. So, did you have any of those cases?
Well, I had the ones. If you're referring to the ones that I was not able to close, I've had a couple there that the kind of the traditional. I knew who did it,
right,
and couldn't prove it. Just didn't have that one
witness.
Affirmative link.
That's a lot of gang murders. I mean, like I said, and not to cut you off, but I know from whether it's open shooting cases we had where somebody didn't die or some of the gang murders. Again, Tulsa, you watch First 48, I mean, they have a very high clearance rate in Tulsa. Very fortunate because, as you and I both know, there are police departments around the country that have horrific. I mean, I'm talking like in the 30%.
Oh yeah, Chicago.
Places like that. That's their closure rate on homicides that have.
I didn't know that. I had no idea.
Absolutely. Like, yeah, I mean, it's insane. So when you're talking, excuse me, him as an individual having a clearance rate that high, or police departments that have very high numbers, that have very high numbers as far as clearances when they are in a department that has a lot of homicides. I mean,
right.
Listen, if you're in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and you have 2 murders a year and you have a 100% clearance rate, well, that's a big difference between.
Well, it looks good on paper.
It looks good on paper, yeah. But when you're talking an actual, larger agency that has a lot of bodies, it's tough. But it's the gang-related stuff. There's even just, like I said, open shooting cases, not necessarily homicides. You know who did it. You just can't get that one person, that one witness that's going to help wrap it up.
Well, you can't get the person. If you've got a talking complainant,
if you've got a victim, they're
not going to.
They're going to take care of it.
We'll go take care of that later on.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, and like I said, it was kind of, I don't know if the word's your expertise, your niche, or whatever. You worked a bunch of the gang stuff down there. And you're right. That's even, speaking for my own experience, when the victim of this violent crime dies, a lot of time those are easier to solve than the guys that are alive that refuse to cooperate. Or like, even if you're like, hey, we know this is the suspect, and he's like, well, I'm not testifying. I'm not telling you anything.
Well, the gang guys, my partner at the time and I, we had really an incredible success rate even with the gang stuff.
Yeah.
Now, when that all started was in 90, what was that, 90, or I guess it was 2005, right? When Katrina hit?
Mm-hmm.
That was about August of 2005.
You guys got a large influx of people.
Oh, golly.
Tremendous
numbers. They
numbers.
filled the Astrodome.
Yep.
Mayor White at the time, yeah, come on over here, we'll take care of you. Well, of course, as they started filtering into the area, the Catricians started coming in.
Did you call them Catricians?
That's I say. I've never heard that term. We got some of those in up in the Tulsa area as well. Yeah, we had them at the National Guard.
Term of affection.
Sure.
No,
Term of affection.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And we, as New Orleans homicide rate started to drop, of course, Houston's went up exponentially, right? And of course, we were dealing with. I made so many trips to New Orleans. I don't ever want to see that city again. And it was
no beignets for you.
Oh, it was unbelievable. And I never saw a larger group of people with the capacity to lie about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it got so bad that the judges in Harris County got together with the district attorney's office and the heads of the law enforcement agencies around Houston and determined that we were going to put everybody that would not identify themselves in jail for failure to ID.
Really?
Yes. And people were getting put in, left and freaking right. And then, of course, we're working with we ended up getting Louisiana's databases to see we can determine fingerprints and
who you guys had, yeah.
To get who do we have? And one of the guys that stands out in my mind in that time frame was a guy named, he called himself B Stupid.
Capital B.
Appropriate. And the gang situation in New Orleans, much different than the gang situation in Houston. They were built on the wards and the areas that they lived in New Orleans. And in Houston, it can be built on neighborhoods, but you're talking about Crip, 5'9" Bounty Hunters, which is a blood group. 5 Deuce Hoover Crips, that are a Crip group. And then you've got these different variations, and they're all tied to some sort of a – and then you've got La Primera. You've got different
Hispanic stuff,
the Latino gangs and that kind of thing. So really just a hodgepodge and a melting pot of gang activity. So that's why the gang murder squad was formed, because at the time that the Catrician folks that were coming over were getting in the fights with the traditional gangs in Houston, and the gangs and the people that were killing people from New Orleans, they were indiscriminate, and it was just unbelievable. And they're used to Napoleonic law, where if they don't make the case in 60 days, they get booted. They get kicked to the curb. And these guys were coming over and doing what they did, and the great intimidation of witnesses in New Orleans and that kind of thing. That's why these guys were getting released. They come to Houston, Texas. They're sitting in the jail. 60 days comes up, and they're
counting down.
They're counting down. That 61st day hits, and they go,
"What the hell?
Why am I still sitting here, man?"
Yeah.
And it's just, welcome to Houston, Texas, brother.
Welcome to Texas.
Yeah, there you go, man. And so yeah, it was a learning curve for us as homicide detectives on dealing with a different type of individual.